Well done. That was a beautiful presentation. Inspirational,
Thank you.
educational, just beautiful.
And fun.
And fun, okay. Enlightening. You can use a number of adjectives to describe it and be correct. You shared a lot of information about your journey as a photographer, a meaningful photographer, not just someone that took pictures, but someone that used the art of photography to make a meaningful expression from a spiritual place in your heart. I'd like to ask a few questions that I have, just to draw out a little bit more about your presentation.
Sure.
So the first one is, what is your process in making one of the images? And in what particular reason do you have for choosing dust from France?
Well, first of all, dust from France. I always liked the idea. Once I got into making it, I looked for dust from different sources because I needed pigment, and of course, the pigment is mixed into oil and it's mixed into other things. But it happened to be the strongest material. There are others that I use also that are much milder. They're not quite as intense as what I find in that area, from that area of France. And I also love the idea that it's possible that the people who made those cave paintings used that pigment. The process is there's a chemical that when you mix it with casein or protein, period, liquid protein, it becomes mildly light sensitive. And so when I make the photograph, when I take the photograph, it is that straight on face, eyes, because I'm looking for the eyes. Even though some of my images don't have the eyes printed, sometimes the eyes are just kind of intended to be there and people get the sense of eyes being there. But it's what's called a contact print process. The negative is the same size as my print. And my prints are 20 by 30 inches or 32 by 42 inches. So they're pretty big. So I have to make a pretty big negative. And so I make it and put it in contact. After that, I expose it to light, an ultraviolet light, for anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour or 2 hours. And then I pour water over it, because all of the areas that are exposed to light become hard. Those areas that are not exposed to light remain soft, and they can be washed off of the paper. So when I pour water over it with a hose or other methods, sometimes I'll just splash water on it to see what happens, to see what if. And it takes out that soft part of it. And then I recoat it and do it again, and I recoat it and do it again, and recoat it until it gets to the point where it says enough is enough. I'm what you need. So it is that conversation of saying, you need to put some pigment here, you need to put some casein there, you need to wash here, you need to wash there, you need to rub there, you need to scrub there, bring out some of the paper here. So it's a beautiful process, it's a fun process, but it is that conversation. So that's how and why I make that image.
I was wondering about the water. I saw a profile of you on a video, and I saw where you were pouring water, and I said, wonder what that's about. So thank you for explaining that. Going back to your childhood, you mentioned looking for positive images of people that look like you, headshots of Black men. How do you think what you saw and didn't see at that time influenced the direction your photography took, even before discovering the Baha'i Faith?
Well, I think I might have imitated what I was seeing, what had been done, or I might not have been a photographer at all. The world of photography as a way of making a living is very limited. It's very difficult because it's a very white world. and it's still very closed and very cliquish. There's been a drastic change within the last few years since George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter, and so people are looking for a lot more. But I think I might not have been a photographer.
Interesting. It's interesting that it took so long till George Floyd.
Yeah, well, obviously Emmett Till wasn't enough for me.
Obviously. I think I might have, I'm sorry, I'm curious about the library book. Is that called The Family of Man?
That was called The Family of Man. And they did that book, I think it was 1953 or 1955, I'm not sure. I think 1953. And taking that book out, because I did see the photographs of Rita Karavi in there, even though I didn't know the name at the time. But there were just a lot of photographs in that book that showed me there was something else in the world. And there was this one thing in there that really, I think, that I remember going over and over, and it was Carl Sandburg's poem, because he wrote that there is only one man in the world, and his name is all men. There is only one woman in the world, and her name is all woman. There's only one child in the world, and the child's name is all children. And that was something, that oneness of humanity, that was something that was common, and it was common around our dinner table at home. My mother felt that way. My father felt that way. My father felt so much that way that when he learned of the Baha'i Faith, when he was 92 years old, he became a Baha'i. And his response was, I've been a Baha'i all my life and never knew what I was. Yet he was teaching me about the oneness of humanity and about the oneness of religion. He used to often tell me that, there are many paths to God.
Thank you. Yes. So that leads me to another question, where you said that you have elevated your perceptions, or at least this is my perception of what I understood from your presentation, that you have elevated your perceptions on a spiritual level in stating the two means of sharing information globally to the world in May 1844, with the creation of the telegraph to read and the photograph to see, at the same time of the Bob's revelation, releasing spiritual powers into the world. Would you attribute it to physical manifestations of a spiritual transformation taking place?
I could give a very simple answer to that. Yes. As a Baha'i, I believe that every manifestation of God has introduced social evolution and to what we are as creations of God. It's interesting because not only was the communication transformed, as far as being able to hear and see, but the idea of time itself changed. Before that, the idea of moving around this planet was very slow. People would walk from space to space, or maybe they rode an animal. And to travel to a distant place, it was a matter of days or months. At that period, mid-19th century, the train was introduced as a mode of travel. And in many cases, that reduced the time of travel from days to hours or a few days at most. And so we all begin to think about time in a totally new way.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And now with planes and the space, borders that divide people become even less important and, in a way, more inconvenient.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I love the statement that you made, art as visual tools to create metaphors of truth. Can you share a bit more on how photographs can transform how we see truth?
Yeah, yeah. The thing on truth is an interesting relationship with photography because I kind of heard of many, many times, and there was probably arguments, discussions among photographers as whether photography told truth, because it
Mhm.
has that reputation of telling truth. But the truth is the photography can lie, and often does. It depends on when you click that shutter, and the lens frames is particularly, it's what the lens sees and captures is defined by the photographer. Um, so, the idea that, for example, um, I talked earlier about photograph by omission. So, the idea of who is for assignments in particular, for example, as to what assignments are given, what jobs are given in the publishing, as to who is put into the photograph, who is put out, taken out of the photograph. I made a point when I was working for the newspaper that if there was a Black person or someone who was kind of um, peripheral to the group, I would put them in the center or close to the center. Because too often, I found that too often they ran out of space in the newspaper, and that person would be cropped off the edge of the print. so I made a point that they were not going to omit that person. But
I love it.
yeah. So it depends on the photographer. It depends on the user of the photograph as to whether it tells the truth or not.
Thank you, Don. So I have another question. You speak of the journey of preparing a technically well done photo versus doing you and the process you went through, both spiritually and materially. It makes me think of the form and the essence or your unique self as a spiritual being. So is that correct to say that it's like, or can you share a bit about the question about form and essence, to speak about how you've been influenced by the blues and jazz? That connection is really interesting and highlights
Yeah,
the spontaneity of it.
sure. Yeah, I hinted at that a little bit when I played Jimmy Reed with that image of dancing.
Yeah,
Um, it's kind of like there's something beyond words in art um, as to how we share with each other. And music, I mean, art just reaches way down deep someplace and makes us feel something that we can't explain.
mhm.
I'll share a little experience with you. A few decades ago, at the Museum of Modern Art, there was an exhibition by Jean Dubuffet. And remember, it was in one of the smaller galleries. And when I walked into that room, it almost knocked me. Well, it did knock me over, really. Um, I mean, fortunately there was a seat. Well, I think maybe I sat hard because there was a little place to sit,
Mm.
and I couldn't stand. I was uncomfortable standing, so I sat hard. I couldn't understand what was going on.
Mm.
A woman came in with a friend, and one of the women did the same thing that I did. I mean, his work was that strong when we went into the room that it just literally knocked us over.
Wow.
And if many people don't know his work, but his work is so very raw. I mean, he works with tar and gravel and I mean, really harsh stuff. And he digs and and then he creates this stuff on almost a two-dimensional space. It's sculptural on the wall. Um, there's also this thing. I mean, we have such a history of blues, of feeling um, from the harshness of cotton, of this nation's agricultural wealth. I um, and out of that, out of the cotton fields, out of the hard labor that we've given to this country, we've created we've created blues, we've created jazz, and we've created gospel, we've created spiritual, and it has a particular feel. And it's a beautiful. The beauty of that is that, and I try to point out, particularly on artists, period, we share with each other. You know, the beauty to me of art is that cultures, races, however we want to put it, we know there's only one race, but there are these different cultures, and we get together and we share and we borrow and we build with each other, and that happens.
I love it. Thank you. Well, with that, there are some questions from the audience. I'm going to share some uh, statements of praise. One is from Elhan Irwin. Thank you so very much for a very enjoyable talk. As an artist myself, I truly appreciated it. God bless. And then from Faranaz Mahoney, oh, what an amazing, beautiful man. From Betsy Belvin, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Don, from Betsy. Thanks for sharing you, Don. How do you believe your work changed you? First question.
Ah, it's it's worked me through a lot of fear about sharing what I think. I said early that it's difficult to accept that I'm an artist. I was the youngest of seven children. All of them were intimidating artists, and I did not want to be like them. I didn't want to be. I didn't just want to be an artist because my family was, and I tried everything else. I finally just kind of figured out that this is all I know how to do. And then I started doing, this what if thing. And you start playing with what if, and you're putting work out there that people haven't seen before in a way that people haven't seen before. I remember one review shortly after I got the Guggenheim Fellowship, and was a show with three Guggenheim photographers. The reviewer the main newspaper at that time in Philadelphia wrote glowingly of the other two photographers. Me, he was just really dismissive, and he said, and it was almost also were a couple of photographs from Don Camp from about his brothers who do things. And it was so brutal, and I was three Guggenheim Fellows. So even with that, it was like, maybe I really shouldn't change what I'm doing because it's not being understood. The responses that I get when I say, "Well, I'm doing black men," and people didn't want me to do black men; they wanted me to do everything but black men. But I knew I was beginning to feel, I had begun to feel that was my only voice. My voice had been shut up for so long that I needed some place to scream and feel hollow. And I could do that with my art.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's how my art has changed me. And to share one other piece, which I really love, and that is, I was parking my car one day in this parking lot, and you had to sign your car in to make sure that you were going to your space and get a slip out and give it to the guard to give to the guard. And so I gave the slip. I went and did my business, and I came back and I gave the guard the slip. And he said, "Are you Don Camp, the artist?" This was a black man. And kind of hit me, yeah, yeah, that's me, but also it was like, yeah, that's me, and I'm wondering why he asked that. And he says, "Thank you. Your work makes me feel like someone,
Mm, wow.
but
Yeah.
my work also makes me feel like someone."
Mm, mm. Okay, beautiful.
How can we buy your book? Amazon.
There's another one here. The last time, this is from Liz De Sosa. She said the last time you spoke, you were working on what you described as beautiful little books. And she always wanted to know more about this project. Is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, those are little limited edition books. They're being limited to 10 books, and they're small 50 or 60 page books. And the first one is called "Where Earth Beats Sky," and that's all I can really say is the second one is still being photographed. The images are not as easy to make as I thought they would be. They're made with iPhone um, because there's an old saying, what is the best camera to use? It's the one that you have with you. And like everyone else now, I have my camera with me. Um, but they're photographs of the sky, sometimes clouds, sometimes no clouds. But the point is there's a relationship where the sky meets the earth, where sky is not incidental to whatever it is. And they're very simple. At this point, they're city images rather than country images, which is the first one.
At least since our time is getting limited now, what I'd like to do is read some more of the the praises, the inspiration, the gratitude.
Okay.
One is sending gratitude and greetings from Sharon, PA. Your work is amazing. We were treated to a fantastic museum lecture from Robert Harris, a university seminar, and a photography master class. 3 in 1. I added that 3 in 1.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your art and the spirit that motivates it. It was a great gift for all of us. And then another one. Thank God you found how to do you, so we can love you for the beautiful soul you are. Your work is amazing. So is your heart. And so I'm Sohela Makbubi. Thank you, Don. After 35 years today, I can say it is the first time you really talk about Don. Thank you for your trust.
May I say one quick thing on the one from Sahela? It's wonderful to hear see you here. But yeah, that was the one thing. It was funny because that's the one and the most difficult thing I had when teaching, because I didn't really teach art or photography. I taught my students how to be themselves. And it was the most difficult thing that they found to do. But when they did it, I wanted them to find themselves because, they were going to go on and be doctors and lawyers and engineers. But I wanted them to find themselves and be that. Because I know how difficult it is, but I also know how important it is.
So with that, Don, it's been a great pleasure being the host, having you here. And as you've heard so many others that were participating in listening to your presentation, what an uplifting and inspirational couple of hours it's been.
Thank you. It was just, I always have to end up with it. It was fun to do.